And they can't read my lips, which is this better? I also talk really fast. Gina, feel free to slow me down. So essentially, and I also want to point out our board members, so the committee members rather. So Danielle Smith, raise your hand. David Parker, raise your hand. Gina Cannon, raise your hand. And me. We are the instructional committee. Tom Croto, Liza Ponier, and Jim are all here. They are not part of the committee, but another change in our behavior over the past couple of years is all board members tend to come to everything now. Without further ado, we'll get to Donna and Kathleen, who are going to do an overview and get this started, and we will then listen to our building level principals to see what comes next. Yeah. Yes, okay, so in my haste to talk quickly, one thing I wanted to acknowledge was the several emails I received today regarding the fact that this meeting is not live streamed. At our last full board meeting, which was here in person and live streamed, we decided that the amount of work it took to make that happen here at this venue, to have some people live streamed in and others here, was significant. And we thought that we would save that level of work for our monthly board meetings, which are the meetings that typically have the most public input. Our last month's worth of committee meetings have taken place in person in the boardroom at the SAU office. Monday night, when we were planning our executive committee process and planning our meetings, Mr. Richards thought it made sense to have this meeting here to acknowledge the fact that people might have comments and want to come and watch in person. So adding that to a typical protocol, we will be open for public comment at the end of this meeting. We did not do the live stream piece because that is something that we decided that we would discontinue doing with committee meetings. So it wasn't purposeful here. I understand the frustration of those of you at home that couldn't get here and want to be more actively a part of the meeting. Send emails, make phone calls, connect with your board members, and we'll do the best we can to respond to every comment that we get. Okay. I think we can start. Does anyone else have anything to say before we get going? Okay. Can't hear you, Kathleen.
I'm waiting. There we go. Well, good evening. We're happy to be here and to present our proposal for moving to a hybrid. And I want to be very clear tonight that moving to a hybrid or staying remote or coming back in person full-time requires an opportunity to look at all of the data. And that data changes every day. So I want, even though we're talking about a hybrid model tonight, and that's our plan, and that's what we've been working on, I want to be clear with everyone that should information and data change, that we will pivot to whatever is the safest model for our students. So I want to be very clear about that before we begin. And I want to get started right away, but I want to thank the principals that are here. We have representation from our elementary schools, and they'll present their proposal, as well as the principal at the middle school and high school. And of course, Donna is with us and has done an incredible amount of work on this, and she's going to start. Also a special shout out to Jack Dunn, who's in here, who helped us set up tonight, and administrative assistant, my administrative assistant, our administrative assistant, Lyndon Jacket is here too, and she's going to do the notes tonight for your committee. So without any further ado, I want to begin and let Donna jump in.
So we're going to really quickly just set the context for this work tonight, the hybrid work. And some of this is a repeat, but perhaps not for everybody in the community. So I think that everyone knows, or at least if you were part of our school district at the time, that from March 16th till June 4th, we were on an emergency learning mode. Our students received instruction that was delivered via Google Classrooms for the older kids and Google Meet and Seesaw for our youngest learners. This work was primarily asynchronous. It was not live. Teachers did yeoman's work to pull that together in very short order. We did surveys of students, faculty, and families. in May into June and in July. We had pretty consistent feedback from those surveys and from folks even who didn't do the surveys but provided feedback that they were able to find positives for sure, but they also noted that they wanted more live interaction with teachers, between teachers and students, more peer-to-peer interaction, more feedback, and more structure in the day. In the summer, we had many, many people working on a variety of tasks within various categories, as you can see. That started in June and continued. As the summer led towards the fall, the work that had been done, quite a bit of that work at a district level, moved into the buildings, and the building principals really took that on and shared that with staff, and they can talk about that further, but continued to work on this model. Lots of hands and lots of thoughts. In the spring and in the summer, we had kids coming into our building, particularly at the high school. We had 80 students in the Regional Technical Center. We had 119 students, most of them at Concord High in a small site on the Heights. We also saw the return of our athletic programs for drills and skills. We had procedures and protocols in place based on federal and state guidelines, and we thankfully and gratefully had no positive cases of COVID-19 at that time. We worked to develop presentations and information around our growing plans. We have a safety protocol and procedure document that aligns with state and federal guidance documents. We have had medical consultations, both with folks at the state and in a private fashion. We offered a variety of trainings to staff from the summer into the fall, some of it voluntary in the summer, some of it mandatory as we came back to school. Our fall remote learning model, from the big picture point of view, is responsive to the summer feedback. It is more scheduled. It has live instruction across 4 days a week, with some meetings and remote instruction on Wednesdays. And we also moved into in-person instructions for students with IEPs, as you know, English learners, 504 plans, unhoused students in our CRTC. Currently, these are the numbers of students who are receiving direct in-school support. So we have 306 students with IEPs, 155 English learners, 648 students at the CRTC. A little over 1,000 students are coming into school. Some of them come 4 days a week, some of them come 2 days a week. They come in various kinds of schedules, perhaps even 5. The CRTC has a kind of a fluid schedule going on. I want to stop before we talk about the hybrid plan, because we've had a lot of questions about, well, why are we doing hybrid, or why are we doing remote? And we've taken this very seriously. We've spent a lot of time thinking about this. We are grateful to actually several epidemiologists in our own community who offered us support, and we're grateful to our Bureau of Infectious Disease Control, who also looked at our plan and gave us feedback. And so the state produced a couple of weeks ago a guidance document meant for schools to help people make decisions about how to move from different levels of educational programming. Their model had 3 levels. They had the full in-person, the hybrid, and the remote. We had already made the decision that because of space considerations and because we conceptually 6-foot distancing was part of our plan, we understood that we were not going to, at this time anyways, go for an in-person model. So we have 2 different models that we're considering transitioning between. And so we have revised, based on input, our model to represent the this decision matrix, and I'm going to walk us through it quickly so we can see. And so you can see that there are 2 axes. So at the top, in the horizontal axes, we have the level of community transmission, and it will be described as minimal, moderate, and substantial. And then on the left, we have the level of school impact, which we'll see as low, medium, and high. What does that mean? Let's take a look at the first, at the top. axes, the level of transmission in the community. The Bureau has provided us with cut points that fit that minimal, moderate, and substantial title. For instance, test positivity as a 7-day average. This is an important data point. They want to see for it to be minimal, below 5%, moderate 5 to 10%, or above 10% to be substantial. We also will look at the number of new infections per 100,000. That's over a 14-day period, and the number of new hospitalizations. So 5, think about below 5, think about below 50, and think about below 10. And we'll use the highest level identified by any one of the criteria for Merrimack County. So how do we get that information? How would we know what our numbers are? The other thing the the division did for us is develop a school dashboard. And the school dashboard is live and updated daily, and it shows us those exact figures in our county, well, in the whole state or in any county, but we're looking at Merrimack County. So here's a snapshot from Merrimack County yesterday. So you're looking in the green at the top. We remember those numbers that we had. 50, so we're at 27.1. 10, and we're at 0 for the hospitalizations. And below 5 for the 7-day test positivity rate, and we're at 0.6. So those are the numbers that we look at every day. And those are the numbers that we take back to this. So if you use that, you'll see right now we're quite in the minimal. We're sort of in the minimal side of the minimal. You can also see, just as an aside on this dashboard, you can see schools that have positive cases. They will put those positive cases in as they are determined. The second, so I'm sorry, I hope I'm not making you dizzy, but the second part, the level of school impact on our decision matrix, we're looking for low, medium, or high. So let's take a look at that. They have set 3 criteria points. One has to do with transmission within the school. So now we're at the school level, not at the district level. Low would be 0 or sporadic cases with no evidence of transmission in that school setting. Medium would be 1 cluster. What's a cluster? A cluster is 3 or more individuals confirmed with COVID-19 who are part of a related group of individuals, like a classroom or a team, who had the potential to transmit infection to each other through close contact. That would be a medium if you had 1 of those clusters. If you had 2 or more that were unrelated and they were within 14 days of each other, you would be rated in the high level. We also look at student absenteeism due to illness. So if we have so many kids out of our school, obviously we would want to think, does it still make sense to be inviting kids into school when so many of them are missing school? So you can see these numbers. And then staff capacity to conduct classes. This is an operational issue. Do we have bus drivers? Do we have food service people? Do we have administrators? Do we have nurses? Do we have teachers? Do we have enough of them to do what we want to do? So this is the second part of that matrix. And so when we come back here, we see that if we were in the minimal or moderate range on the two criteria chunks, the 2 factor areas, then we would be in the hybrid area. And we believe that we are in the hybrid area. But we also believe that we watch these constantly. We look at this data every day. And we look at our own internal data as well. So just an understanding, again, I don't want to belabor it, but this is all in our frequently asked questions, and there's a document that describes this further. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to move over to the elementary principals. And we have 3 here today, Chris Gallo from Krista McAuliffe, and Katie Scarpetti from Millbrook, and Susan Losey from Broken Ground. And they are going to present a document which is also located on our website in our back to school section under hybrid plans. I'm going to bring it up here as well. So I just need a second to do that. Okay. So Yes, I think it is on the, it's supposed to be on the banner, but I know that sometimes it takes a little while for it to appear, so I haven't looked to see if it's on the banner right now, but we will certainly post it. If it's not, we'll post it. We'll make sure it's posted by the end of the day. But for instance, that matrix that I just went through, that is on the website on the Back to School tab under our frequently asked questions. I think it's the second question.
Yeah, I just figure if people who are watching or whatever want to be able to look it up and go over it,
Yes,
it's on the website.
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Donna, are you putting that up? Or is that where you want me to start?
Yes, is that
Okay. I'll just review.
Is that where you want to be?
Yeah, I'll just review the pre-K to 12 district guiding principles. They remain the same for our remote model as well as our hybrid model, ensuring health and well-being of all individuals, focusing on the attainment of grade level course competencies, and focusing on staff and student social emotional growth, as well as a strong focus on the needs of our students in our most vulnerable populations. Okay.
Just help
Do you
me
want me to repeat any of that?
out. No, just slow down and overpronounce. That's
Okay.
what I do.
Overpronounce.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if you'll look up on the screen, you can see a side-by-side model of our hybrid and remote models.
Much better.
Good? Yeah. So we have a cohort model for hybrid, which is what we're introducing tonight, and then beginning in October on the 5th with grades K1, 6, and 9. And then we'll bring the rest of our grade levels in on October 13th. We will divide students who are returning in the hybrid model into two groups, groups A and B. And the high school started with the groupings, moved it down to the middle school, making sure siblings were placed together unless otherwise specified by families. And that moved down to the elementaries, and we're also placing the remainder of the siblings together and then finishing the task off from there. So we will keep our Wednesdays exactly the same as they have been. We've had shorter Wednesdays with live instruction with teachers. That will not change in the hybrid model. It allows for our staff to work together, planning with us, planning with one another and their colleagues. Our major goal for us is to keep our students in our vulnerable populations coming in 4 days during the school week. Although students in Group A will come in 2 days, students in Group B will come in 2 days. We currently are bringing in most of our vulnerable populations right now for 4 days. That is our goal, as long as we have the staffing to do that, and if we have the space in each of our schools to do that. Other goals are to ensure, just like in the remote model, that we continually focus on a full year's growth at every grade level within our curriculum. This document for hybrid mirrors as close as possible the goals and the instruction from the remote model. We worked on it this summer. We created it as a mirror throughout the summer as we worked on it and received feedback from teachers. We were very careful to think about screen time. It's not perfect. We know our students are in front of screens 7:45 to 2:30. Our teachers have done a fantastic job trying to minimize that time. They focus their direct instruction in small bursts. They send kids off to work on independent work, give them specific times to come back, understanding that several breaks are needed throughout the school day. Eyes get tired, brains get tired, parents get tired. And lastly, we are at a place where we're almost ready to assign students to specific staff, specific classroom teachers. We're still waiting on some assignments for approvals through HR, who's just about finished. And once that's done, we will be able to place students. I think it's really important for our community to know, especially our parent community, that we're not able to keep all students with their current classroom teachers. Some students will have to be moved based on their choice for remote or hybrid, based on teachers' choice for remote or hybrid. In many cases, that's not a choice. A lot of teachers need to be remote teachers for medical reasons, childcare, and those reasons. So we will do our best to get those decisions made quickly, and we will communicate that out to families. Any specific questions for me on the overview before I hand this over to Katie to actually walk you through the model? Gina.
Sorry, I don't know if the mic's on. So for the kids that cannot stay with their current teachers, will they know that ahead of time? And then at that point, if they choose to stay remote, do they stay with the teacher? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Just repeat it one more time.
Okay, so if they have a current teacher now who has to stay remote for medical reasons, will they know in time, will the parents know in time to be able to say, okay, I would prefer my kid to stay remote to stay with the teacher? Will that be an option?
It's a perfect chicken and egg scenario.
Yes.
So the answer is really no. We had to make a decision which data to move forward with. We made the decision to move forward with student data to then determine how many teachers we needed for hybrid and remote.
Liza?
Okay.
So here's an example. I have a child in 5th grade. If I were to call my principal and ask if her teacher is going to stay remote or be in the classroom, would I be able to get an answer before we make a decision?
My personal answer to my own teachers has been no, because in many cases that's a medical reason, and that's not something that folks are very comfortable sharing. And if I said yes to that, believe me, you will have changed all of the work we had just completed. Just about every parent will want to say, then I'm changing my mind, and we can't keep doing the reorganization.
Thank you.
I just want to comment quickly. Having organized many activities for large groups of kids, it would be nice to always have your kid in the group with their best friend or in the group that meets in the morning and not the afternoon, and sometimes it's incredibly frustrating. This level of frustration is huge for everybody. When I say everybody, I mean me, the mother, you, the principal, you, the mother, you, the citizen. It's crazy. So I'm just acknowledging that. I'm sure people at home are like, well, that's not right, I should be able to know. But sometimes you don't know until you've made the decision. So it's that cart horse thing. I'm just acknowledging it a little bit, trying to make sure I understand it.
Yeah, David?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Oh, no.
No, speak
Okay.
closer.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay, now, actually just one question. And this is about teachers. They have childcare needs and they're able to stay home. What about all the parents? They have childcare needs.
No, teachers
And-
are taking childcare leaves if they need to provide childcare to their family.
Understand, but all the parents out there are having to deal with that as well. And we don't.
Correct?
And many of them have to go to work, so they're struggling. This is the feedback I'm getting. I also wonder about Wednesdays. Why is Wednesdays, I still don't understand why that's a day off, so to speak, and why, and this is probably more to the larger question. I never quite understood that, and what's going off, what's going to happen.
I did
on
not say
Wednesdays.
Wednesdays are days off. They're shorter, so students are doing work until about noontime, and that's
Okay.
when teachers start working with us. But they're still receiving live instruction on Wednesdays.
Okay, I didn't.
That won't change from what we're currently doing. That stays completely consistent.
Okay.
And David, teachers that need childcare are taking leaves of absence from their jobs. They're not getting to stay home and teach so they can be with their kids.
Okay.
They have to take a leave.
Correct.
Oh, okay. I just needed.
Yeah,
to
I
clarify.
understood.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Katie. Thank you.
So I'm just going to walk you through this document, and it talks about the instruction that will happen in both hybrid and remotely. And as Chris shared, we really worked hard to try to mirror the two so that students in both models are receiving similar instruction. So all classes will start with a morning meeting, whether they're in person or remote. The students who are in person will have 2 in-person meetings a week, and then on Wednesday, the whole class will meet for their remote meeting. Students who are at home will have the same thing they're having now, where they have the 5 morning meetings a week. And really the focus of these meetings are to work on social connections and support social emotional learning and growth. And then if we want to take a look at the math, so this is where you'll start to see that we really tried to compensate so that everyone is getting that same instruction, and how do we move through our curriculum and really help our students have that whole year's worth of instruction. So students who are in person will receive 70 minutes of instruction both days that they're in school. This will consist of direct instruction, guided practice, practice with teacher feedback. All of that independent practice will be saved to be done the next day at home. Students who are remote have been receiving between 20 to 35 minutes of direct instruction for 4 times a week. So it comes out to be about the same amount of time. And the same thing, that live instruction consists of direct instruction, feedback, and guided practice. And then that independent piece is done offline. Right, and so that's the other important piece, is that our classes are half the size, so it'll be between 7 to 11 students, which will allow teachers in person to help students. And
On remote days, are the students online with a teacher working, or are they just on their own at home?
so they will have at-home assignments on their own. So they'll save things like Zern, which is our guided math, and Lexia. Those will be done online. And then they'll have assignments from their teacher from the day before.
Okay.
There are possibilities that they'll receive some of their intervention, like Title I reading. That might happen on those days they're home. And then for writing, both groups will receive 2 mini lessons a week, and then they will have conferences every week where they'll meet with the teacher, or they'll meet in a small group to go over skills and instruction. And again, offline, they'll be working on building their stamina and editing pieces and specific assignments. Our interactive read-alouds will be done 3 times a week, and you can see the different times for each grade level. And 1 can be done on Wednesdays as a whole group, or as if you choose in your hybrid model, you could do 2 on one of the days that the students are there. And then we talk about guided reading, where we'll be meeting with students at least 2 times a week, and students who are below grade level will have guided reading instruction more than 2 times a week. And at home, they'll have assignments that will extend that in-person learning. For reading mini lessons, 3 lessons will be done per week. Again, 1 may be done on Wednesday, or you might decide to do it while the students are in front of you, depending on your schedule and what you decide is best. And then they'll have independent reading books at home, where they'll be doing their reading response, much like they would do in the classroom. They would go off and practice the skill that was taught. Lexia will be done at home on those days they're not here, and the same thing that would be done independently on the remote days. Word study, you can see that there are 3 lessons a week, K to 1, and then 2 lessons for 2 to 5. That same for remote learning. Practice activities to support this as well. So science and social studies will be incorporated throughout content times in ELA, both through reading and writing. Project C lessons will be done on those Wednesdays when they're home, or on those off days, they're non-cohort days, which could include Mystery Science or Mystery Doug. And students could do some student-led projects on topics in social studies. The same thing for the remote students. And then our specialists in Project Key, they'll have one 45-minute special each day they're in person. Wednesdays will continue. They have a shorter live mini lesson from their specialist teacher. And they'll attend the same specialist, so they'll have art for 3 to 4, a set number of weeks at a time before switching to a new specialist to help reduce the contact. And the same for the students who are remote. They'll receive lessons from their specialist teachers. And I think that's it. Do you have any questions?
Jim?
So I have just one question, and it might not be to you, it may be someone else, but on Wednesdays when they're doing, there is some in person, will we still have enough time and the ability to deep clean that school on a Wednesday to be able to be ready for Thursdays, even though there's going to be some in there? Because we do want to make sure we do that protocol.
Kathleen's going to answer.
I think I can probably answer that for you, Jim. Great question. We are doing a clean every day under the direction of our facilities director, Matt Cashman, and his staff. They decided that they would not wait till Wednesday to do that deep clean, but that, in fact, every day they would do a cleaning. On Wednesday, they would do over and above. So he's indicated to me that he will be changing the shift hours a little bit so that students who are in person on Wednesday who receive services, after they leave, they'll do that deep clean.
Thank you, that's reassuring for me.
Any other questions?
So in terms of direct instruction, direct live instruction really does cut from 4 days to 2 days because they're getting it when they're in school. And then when they're home, they have that second day to work on stuff, but they're not in a group talking online with friends or teachers.
That's correct, but you'll see the time that's allotted is the same. So although they're kind of front loading, so they're getting a lot of it up front, whereas if you're remote those 4 days, it's spread out.
No, I understand. And also, there's a lot of ways to look at how learning takes place, and for some kids, excuse my French, it's ass and seat time when they're there listening, but oftentimes there are plenty of learners that do much better when they can process it on their own. So I can see where there's a balance, and where in our excitement to be back at school at all, a lot could be accomplished face-to-face.
Right, especially with those smaller class sizes, that will help with that
Right.
too.
Tom and then Gina.
This is for any one of you who feels comfortable answering it. So tell us just briefly a little bit about assessing students so that in November, when there's a report card, parents can be assured that something, I don't think be assured is the correct phrase, but just tell us about it.
So I can talk a little bit about what's happening at Millbrook with our youngest learners. We have done some assessments. We actually did our kindergarten screening all online and remotely with our Title I team. And they said it went much better than expected because you can imagine they were kind of thinking this isn't going to work, and it actually went pretty well. We've also figured out a way to do our running records, which is really what guides our reading instruction.
Okay.
It can't be the formal BAS because that material is not available online, but we're doing those informal running records to gather a reading level that will help us with our instruction. And the same for math. Our exit tickets, we're going to ask to be done for students who are in person, will always be done where the teacher can see their thinking and talk with them about it. So we'll be able to gather that information as well.
And then just, if I may, one follow-up. Have we talked about parent conferences? I know that may be down the road a ways, but I think more than ever this year, parents probably remotely will want to have those parent conferences.
We have not talked about that just yet, but I do think there's an option either to do it over Zoom or to see where we stand, and what our numbers look like. But I agree that it's really important, and we've talked about ways to do some family engagement things remotely to help families support their students.
I'm sure you haven't had much to think about. Huh?
No, a lot of free time. Anyone else?
Gina.
So I wanted to make a comment for the parents who are concerned that their kids are receiving only two days of live instruction. And I'm going to backtrack and when I took my child out of school to homeschool her, because it was one-on-one, the amount of material that could be covered, because obviously I was doing it one-on-one, but the amount of material that you can cover with a smaller classroom is, in my opinion, not linear, but exponential, because you just move through it faster with a smaller group. So the parents that are concerned that, well, my kid's getting half, they're only getting half, I want to say, obviously keep an eye on how your child's doing, but don't be as concerned as the numbers look, because with the smaller class sizes, the amount of material that the teacher has to go, that the teacher's going to get through in a day is going to be significantly more than if the class were a normal size. I just wanted to make the comment. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an elementary school teacher
You're right.
anymore.
Yep. We agree, and I think that's why. And even live instruction, you know, our teachers are doing a phenomenal job with remote instruction. There's something to be said for getting that feedback right there, live on the spot in person. So I think you're right, and I think it's hard for us to wrap our heads around a class size of 7 to 11 when we're used to 18 to 20. So we'll have to see it in action, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go on, Jim.
We're
Jim
gonna
is our,
move
Jim is our
over.
mic cleaner.
We're going to go to Paulette Fitzgerald, who's our middle school principal now. Paulette, I'm going to cue up yours, but you tell me if I'm not in the right thing you want to look at, so I'm going to move that over.
Keeping you safe. Thank you. From those dirty-handed elementary school. Playing in the dirt.
That was a thorough cleaning.
You're welcome.
All right, so just to follow up on my elementary colleagues, what we have here is we'll show our transition to hybrid. So it's hard to talk with them with the mask on, isn't it?
Slow and over enunciate.
Slow and enunciate, okay. So what we did, as Chris Gallo said, is we aligned with the high school with regard to siblings and then shared our information with the elementary schools. And so what we have up here is our first week, October 5th, with our 6th graders. And you can see cohort 1 and cohort 2 and how their schedule will progress through the day. And we've aligned with the high school, so when Mike comes up, you will see a very similar schedule for transportation for siblings and all of that. So you can see that they will go through a very typical day in the life of a middle school student, meeting with their teachers and having their recess and their exploratory classes. And then again, this is phase 2 with all of the grades starting. We have Monday with no school. We have Tuesday will be our synchronous day with all students. And again, that was to keep in line with the high school. Wednesday will be our flex day, and as Katie and Chris said, on Wednesdays, it's not a day off at all. All of our students sign in with advisory, and we have attendance taken. Our teachers have office hours when they're meeting with small groups of students, and it's also a time for teacher collaboration, and we have some clubs starting as well remotely. And so on Thursday and Friday of this week, we will have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in cohort 1, and then cohort 2 on Friday. And this is, I'm trying to remember what this is. Oh, this is the 7th grade schedule, yep. So this, and it's very similar. This is, the 7th graders will be going through their typical day. So there's some redundancy here as we're showing 6th and 7th and 8th grade. And then you get to see what their daily schedules are as well. 6th grade and 7th grade have a waterfall schedule, and you'll see that on the next slide. So for 6th grade, you can see on Monday and Tuesday, cohort 1 and 2 are following the same schedule, academic 1, 2, and 3, and exploratory A. And then on Thursday, they will have academic 4, 1, and 2. So you can see how the waterfall works there. Donna, can you go? Yeah, there you go. And then on the Duke week, so we have Blue Week and Dew Week. I believe Duke Week. I believe the high school will have Crimson and Tide weeks. Then the waterfall continues on Monday and Tuesday. Academic 3, academic 4, and then you can see on Thursday. Oh, it goes down. It went off the page a little bit. Okay. And then you can go down the next slide. Oh, there you go, is 7th grade in person, and you can see the schedule that they follow on Blue Week and on Duke Week. And then you can see how that waterfalls. This is a lot of information that's probably making you dizzy here.
So I have a quick clarification.
Absolutely.
So every week it varies which class only meets once. I mean, with the waterfall, like there's...
With the waterfall over a 2-week period, they will have each
same
class
number?
3 times.
Okay, that's good.
Yes.
Yeah, just because that's what's confusing to look at.
It is, it really is. And then you can go to 8th grade, which does not waterfall. We share staff with the high school, which is another reason that we tried to stay very much in line with the high school, because we share staff and we also share students. We have some students who go to the high school for math. So that was the other reason that we tried to stay in line with what they were doing. And you can go down to the next slide. So we wanted to give you a sample of a student's schedule and what they would be and Barb, this might help clarify that. So you can see on a Monday, if you're a student in cohort 1, you would have advisory, then math, then WIN, which is our intervention block, and recess lunch, language arts, exploratory A, social studies. Then on Tuesday, that student is working on assignments from Monday's lesson in preparation for Thursday and the following Monday, or the following Monday. And then you can see on Thursday the classes that they're having.
Science. Oh, then that, I see. So this is a once a week for social studies week, but the next week it's a different class that's once.
Correct.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct.
Liza?
Yes.
The version of this that's on the website, which is the one I'm looking at, does not have that. It has all math, so you might want to just make sure the right PDF gets up to the website.
Thank you.
You bet.
Oh, Jim, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Principal, the thing that I know it's a big challenge and all, but how about physical activity? We're not going to be having a lot of interactive physical activity. How will we encourage our students to remain physically active with this schedule?
Throughout the day? You're right, because they're staying in one classroom, though in 8th grade there may be more movement just because of the number of classes that they take. So we will have mask breaks for them. We'll try to get them outside. 6th grade also has recess, and we will also try to do that for 8th graders as well. Try to give them some time.
So are teachers moving classrooms and kids stay in one room all day?
For 6th grade, we're hoping that teachers will move.
Right.
And for 7th grade, we're hoping that we can make that work. Again, we're waiting for final staff lists to come out, and also waiting on final numbers for students.
Right.
But that is our goal. We're hoping we can make that happen. In 7th grade, They will probably have to move for science because they go into the science labs and they have the microscopes and labs all there. So that will probably be the only exception for 7th grade. 8th grade, we're working, and Donna, if you can go to 8th grade. Oh, so this is a sample 8th grade for the teacher. So maybe go back to the 8th grade schedule. Gonna have everybody dizzy here.
I misspoke a minute ago. What I was looking at was the teacher schedule. That's what said all math. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh my goodness, I knew I sent on
No, my mistake.
this one.
Thank you.
So if you're an 8th grade student, as you go through your day, 8th graders, it's a little more high school-ish in that some students take algebra, some students take world language, and some students have guided study. So that's what we're working on now, Barb, to answer that question. It will be a little more challenging to have them in one room all day. But they are on the second floor in their own wing, with the exception of science. So we're pretty confident that we can keep safety a priority there as well.
In conversations with friends of mine that teach in different districts, this has been a back and forth, this very thing. Do we move the teachers or do we move the students? And there's been some give and take and some alterations made in every single case that I've heard of where, like computer, for example, if you're in computer class and you're in a classroom with no computers, that can make that learning pretty tricky. So I would encourage us all to be open to the fact that we might have to come up with some creative passing plans should we need to move kids from room to room.
I do have to say right now, for exploratory, what we're hoping to do, again, 6th grade is an easy example, is to have that cohort of 10 kids go to one exploratory. So they might be in art class, for that period of time. And that also minimizes the exposure for the teachers as well.
Right, they have the same small group.
Right, that same small group. Okay, now you can go to the teacher schedule just to give you an idea of what a teacher schedule would look like. And I think, Liza, this is what you are looking at.
Yes, thanks.
Because I think it's important for you to see what the teachers are doing during their days as well. And, attendance is something that is a big focus too. In the spring, we did, I think, a really good job of keeping track of every student to make sure that they were safe. And we made DCYF calls, and we were reaching out to other agencies. This year, we're really focusing on attendance to make sure kids are really doing what they're supposed to be doing, that they are actively engaged in their learning. So we take attendance every day during advisory, and then we're also taking attendance during every class period. That also includes monitoring the kids who might leave early, and so we're curious what's going on with those students. Of course, when we get to hybrid and they're in the building, it will be a little easier to keep track of that. Yeah. But I think it's important that you know that we've been also tracking that during this remote period as well. Yeah, and this, right at the top there, Barb, again, this I think will answer some of your questions. For grades 6 and 7, 3 in-person 75-minute lessons in a 2-week cycle per class. And then for grade 8, 4 in-person lessons in a 2-week cycle per class. You'll see that the 6th and 7th grade classes are longer, and 8th grades are shorter, so it kind of evens out.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, Gina?
And then Liza.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. So what happens with the kids that are deciding to stay remote?
So that's an excellent question, and one that we have been really working on. One of the things we were looking at today, and we've been kind of knee-deep or neck-deep in spreadsheets and looking at numbers, we're hoping that we can have each teacher in their schedule have one class that is a remote class that they're teaching. So if you are a student in school and you're in 7th grade, then you will be with your teacher, your science teacher, your social studies, just like you are now. Except that teacher will have that period without students in front of them. They will be focusing on the remote students.
I don't envy your spreadsheets.
So that's what we're looking at. Those are the numbers that we're looking at. We're trying to keep all of our students with the same teachers. Right now, we may be able to do that for 7th and 8th. 6th grade is looking a little iffy, but we still have numbers coming in. So the process has been actually quite fascinating and frustrating, but we had the results of the survey, so we pulled all the RMS data out of that. Then from that, we divided the data into grade levels and then compared the responses with our enrollment. And so we've been making, over 200 phone calls trying to reach out to families who haven't responded. And then from there, determining who's remote and who's hybrid, and there it goes. So it's an interesting process. Yes.
So the teacher schedule example you gave, they, 3/4 of those sections would be in person, and then the fourth would be them in their classroom, but teaching a remote class.
Right, and it looks like right now that will work for 8th grade. That's what we were looking at this afternoon. So they have 5 classes that they teach. So 4 would be with the students in front of them, and then 1 would be with the students who are remote.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
We'll call our high school principal, Mike Reardon.
Good evening, everyone. I want to start just with a quick note to parents. Tomorrow, we'll put out a detailed video of the material we're going to go over for the board right now. And then next week, Tuesday or Wednesday, I would imagine, we'll have a 2-hour online forum similar to the one we did earlier in the year, where you can ask questions and in some cases even get answers, if you're lucky. So I want to start with phase 3. I will get back to phase 1 and 2 in a minute. So many of you will remember that over the summer, when we were coming into the school year, we had proposed going to a 4x4, which again, I know it's educational jargon, but it simply means that kids would take 4 classes, 3 or 4 classes one semester, and they take the other 3 or 4 next semester. So that seemed like given what we're dealing with, a good way to approach this logistically. So what we've done here is kind of a variation of that. So what you have in front of you is Crimson Week. So Crimson Week, students are divided into their 2 cohorts. First cohort meets on Mondays and Thursdays, periods 1, 3, 5, and 7, 4 classes. On the off day, and I want to take a minute to talk about this, on the off day, when they are not face-to-face with their teacher, they are doing asynchronous work. However, unlike what went on in the spring, this work is going to be organically and intimately connected to what went on in the class prior, as well as a preparation to what's going on in the in-person class coming up. Now, I can stand here and tell you guys anything, but I would point out to you that the difference between what our teachers are doing now in remote from what they did in the spring. We foregrounded 2 goals. One was for significant interaction between the teacher and his or her students, and second, a foregrounding of social and emotional well-being, working with the kids on that very important area. I think that you would all agree. I know the parents agree, the staff, and those of you I've heard from on the board agree that our staff has come up and done a tremendous job with those things. And I only point that out, well, one, to praise them for the work, but also this connection between what goes on in class and what goes on in the asynchronous class is really a key. If what goes on in the asynchronous class is just the odd number questions at the end of the chapter, it's really kind of a waste of time. It might as well be, David, a day off. What I am suggesting to you is we are going to make a concerted effort, and I have no doubt that we'll be successful, to make sure that that work is organically connected to the classes that it sits between. So on Wednesday, as you can see, Wednesday is decidedly not a day off. But if you notice the periods that they're not the same periods that the kids have on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. In other words, on the Wednesday, they are going to meet synchronously online with their classes from the Tide Week, the upcoming Tide Week. And as you'll see, not surprisingly, when we get to Tide Week, on that Wednesday, they'll be meeting with their Crimson classes. So this is the following Tide Week. Now we're into 2, 4, 6, and 8. And on the remote day, on the remote synchronous Wednesday, they're back to 1, 3, 5, and 7. So how does that work? That gives them the opportunity to meet with a teacher, ask questions, clarify things, get back on track, and maintain that momentum. I know, especially parents, I think, might be saying, well, this basically means that my student will not see his classes from the previous week for a whole week. I would suggest if the quality of our instruction is not sufficient, that students maintain that learning to some significant degree over that week, it's probably not even worth doing. I think that the depth of instruction needs to be strong enough, significant enough, so that there is not an issue of maintaining that over a week's time. So this is our basic schedule. Basically a 4x4, but only half of the classes, that's why it's 4x4, each week. And then in the middle of the week, in the Wednesday synchronous remote, they are doing a check-in, about 40, 45-minute classes with the previous week's teachers to maintain that connection. I would also point out on Wednesdays that we have set aside time for teacher collaboration, which is huge, especially around issues of using technology effectively. Teachers will be offering office hours when kids can check in with them, again, to ask questions or go to their guidance counselors and support people. And then our clubs, this has already started, our clubs meet at 2 o'clock at the end of the day to get those important social, emotional activities started. So those are a basic setup for our schedule. And Don, if we can go back to phase 1 now. So here's phase 1. This is the freshman orientation, if you will. We've had an orientation with the freshmen, but this is going to allow them to get acclimated to their teachers, to where their rooms are in the building, to each other, to me and Peanut, which is very important. This transition week, they are basically doing the same type of deal that we saw with the Crimson Tide Week. On the Monday, we have the first cohort doing periods 1 and 3, 1, 3, 5, and at the end of the day, 7 after lunch. And then that flips to periods 2, 4, 6, and 8 on Wednesday and Thursday. So that's to get the freshmen in, get them acclimated, get them moving academically, get them feeling safe and secure in the building so that they know their teachers, they know the building, they know us, and they feel at home as the upperclassmen come in. So phase 2, October 13th, this is that weird week, no school on Columbus Day. Then we are going to have a remote day. Notice that there, again, it's just, that Tuesday is just 4 periods. Why those 4 periods? Because those are the opposite periods from what we're doing on, no, stay where you are. Those are the opposite periods from what's going on Thursday and Friday when we're doing tie days. Okay? So that Tuesday we'll get people going in those classes, get some time for orientation in those classes. But then we're going to have 2 tie days in a row on Thursday and Friday. I know this seems a little confusing right now, but the reason for that is when we get to the full Crimson Week following, they're going to have the Crimson classes. So this puts some emphasis on the Tide classes at the end of that week. And on that Wednesday, we've got, for reasons that escape me, the state's making us do this school day SAT. I really think it's inappropriate this year, but
Yeah.
so it is. So that is that's kind of where we are at the high school. Questions? Yes, Barb.
So when I first started teaching at Concord High School, it was the shift from 7 periods a day to block scheduling and having to make 8 periods, and it was not easy. And there were teachers that, especially foreign language and AP teachers, that were concerned if I have a student on Tuesday and then Thursday I don't see them till Tuesday, oh my gosh, all those days of not seeing them. But at the end of a 9-week quarter, the number of hours or minutes in the class was no different than whether they were 45 minutes every day or 90 minutes 2 days a week, that in the 45 on Monday. So my initial reaction to this was similar. Like I'm thinking, okay, so you have German on Monday and Thursday and at home with it on Tuesday and Friday, and then you don't speak German again for a whole week. This was my initial reaction. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know how this makes any sense. Thinking back to the 10 little kids in the elementary class who are going to get a lot more in that day than they might get in 2 remote days, I do feel that this is a bit similar to when we first switched to block scheduling. And yes, there will be big chunks of days that students aren't speaking German or dissecting frogs or whatever it is, but at the end of a 9-week quarter, they get the same number of days, correct? Same number of in-person, same number of remote.
Right.
My one concern that maintains is as long as teachers, has there been good staff input on this? Do they feel good about it?
We met for quite a while with our curriculum facilitators about this. We just put it out to, I think, Kylene, you put it out to the English department the other day. I think it was pretty positive. Okay, and it's in internal Crimson Notes, which is our mode of communication in the building, so they all have this. I think this is a workable and meaningful schedule.
I think whatever class they're in that week will be amazing, because it's the whole week are those 4 classes.
Yeah.
So all of this is so two-sided, and no matter what we decide, half the people won't like it. So I'm learning to live this way. But when I think about myself as a teacher, I'm a health educator, it would be a lot of fun to have those kids all the time, even if it was only every other week.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to emphasize that piece for people at home that might not really understand what all this means, really logistically and practically.
Right. And sometimes it's worth pointing out the obvious, that we are in an extraordinary situation. Every schedule has its strengths and weaknesses. I'm sure you've heard that before. Given the situation that we're in, here's what's important in this particular schedule. This was the main thing we looked for, was getting the kids face-to-face twice a week for 90 minutes each. We feel that time is invaluable to the education of the kids, but also their social and emotional well-being. Yeah. Creating that sense of community in the classroom, being able to work with their peers, being face-to-face with their instructor, and when they're out of the classroom, because they feel that sense of community, of obligation to their peers and to their teacher for the work that's going on in there, we feel that work's going to be a lot more meaningful to them.
How will the remote students that decide to stay remote full-time, will they have the similar schedule?
Yeah. Now, a few weeks ago, a month or 4 or 5 weeks ago, I did a video. I don't remember what it was on, but I made the statement that people who are going to stay remote may not be able to keep their classes. And, you know, I started getting bomb threats and, well, I didn't really get bomb threats, but I got a lot of nasty grams about that. So I'm happy to report that no one's going to have to change their schedule. What's going to happen with remote kids is that they are going to Zoom in with their peers to the in-class, in-building classes. They're going to do the asynchronous work along with their peers, the same work that their peers are doing. We are also including, our guidance department is going to meet with them on a weekly basis with the fully remote kids to work on social emotional issues. You know, based upon their commons, that we have 2 counselors in each commons, so they're going to be working with them. But they're not going to have to change teachers, they're not going to have to change courses. And I think that's
a huge relief right now. So I wish we could do that in all of our schools, make that work. I know it's a logistical nightmare, but you know, if you have your German teacher, she's your German teacher.
Yeah.
What do you do? So they'll like cohort. So say I'm cohort A, and my sister is fully remote, and I'm hybrid. So I'll be in the class in my sister's home, but she'll be in the class from home.
Right.
And then on the next day, she just does asynchronous work like everybody else.
Yeah. Now, you know, we've been trying to pay a lot of attention to the quality of the technology because this whole enterprise rests on that.
One power failure.
So we've been working on getting those sound pucks into each classroom so that as a teacher moves around, he or she is still clear to people who are on their computer. We've talked about phase 4 too, which would, you know, where you have the camera that swivels and kind of almost like a magnet moves it around with the teacher and that type of thing, and getting even more sophisticated. You know, if this virus sticks around, I think that's something we might want to think about upgrading that, because this type of learning is going to become more and more important. But I think that we are in pretty good shape to get this started. We have all our safety protocols in place. You know, masks are not going to be an issue. What's going to be an issue for us at the high school is social distancing. Because unless you have armed guards every 15 feet along the hallway, kids will have a tendency to get together. So we're working on ways of doing that. You know, I'll also say, in fact, this is probably a good thing to parents and kids to hear. We are going to have very little tolerance for mask violations, for wandering the building. Anything like that. We are actually going to keep discipline logs of that and go on a basic 3 strikes and you're out, just because of the significance of those violations. If a student can't adhere to that, he's going to have to go, or she's going to have to go to a remote setting. We're also struggling a little bit right now to get our lunches under control, of all things, but I think we'll be able to do that. You know, it's all issues around distancing and finding spaces for those kids to eat. But we're working on this stuff, and I think we'll get it squared away.
Nice. Danielle?
I think Dave was first. I can go after Dave.
All right, David and then Danielle.
Thanks, Mike.
And then
And I know how challenging putting all these schedules together is, and appreciate that effort. On the remote days, how are you going to keep accountability to attendance? on those days? Because I've had some concerns from families about that. And as well, you talk about kids accessing their counselors. Will the counselors be accessing them? These are teenagers, and my experience is, and this is not a criticism, it's a question, is that a lot of them will not access, you have to access them, because they won't always ask for help or look out. So I'm just curious about those two things.
So
Thank you.
The question about remote days, again, I go back to what I said about the organic connection between the work that goes on in the in-class day and what goes after it in the asynchronous day, and how that asynchronous work feeds into the next in-class day. I cannot overemphasize how important that is. If that work that goes on in between those two is, for want of a better term, meaningless, if it's just stuff to do, then, for all intents and purposes, it is a day off. If, however, that is intricate and intimate to what's going on academically, educationally, pedagogically in that class, then it's something that the kid needs to do to demonstrate that he understands what's going on and to be prepared for what's going to take place in the following class. That's really the linchpin to the whole thing, that they're able to be on their own or to work with the sense of community, to work with their peers, a small group or pairs or whatever it is, to get that work done and be prepared for what comes after. With counselors and so forth, the counselors are going to be very aggressive about this stuff. I mentioned what they're going to be doing with our remote learners, that they are going to actually be forming a special weekly SEL program for them. I know that for the kids who are in a hybrid, they'll be meeting, especially the upperclassmen are meeting with their counselors around college issues. Kids who have ongoing personal needs, emotional needs, have time set aside to work in small groups with counselors and advisors and that type of thing. So that's all that stuff that takes place normally has become even more important in this atmosphere.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple of questions about the kids who are Zooming into class.
Illegally?
Illegally.
Yeah.
So are there not teachers working remotely at Concord High?
Are there?
Are all Concord High teachers teaching the hybrid model?
No. We have about, I'd say 15 teachers who have various types of leaves or situations where they're going to be remote. I've met with just about all of them as part of the process that HR has had them go through. Here's the deal, folks. So if I have a science teacher who has a child care issue or a health issue and needs to remain remote, I can, try to find another science teacher. Good luck with that. If I were to find another science teacher, you'll need even more luck to find one who's as good as one, anywhere near as good as the one I've already got. That science teacher is going to continue to teach her classes, but she's going to be teaching it remotely. So that means, this is actually kind of interesting, that means that depending upon where her kids are when she teaches them, if she's teaching them first block, those first block kids, we don't want them in the high school. Because we don't, not because we don't want kids in school, this is the whole point of the thing, but we don't want kids who don't need to be there, because the fewer kids we have there, for obvious reasons, the better off we're going to be. So they would do that class at home, and then if they have a block 2 class, and we're working with transportation and a lot of the kids, especially upperclassmen, have their own cars. A lot of the other kids, their parents are taking them in. They would come in. If that same situation happened in the middle of the day, we're going to have places like the Student Center, the Media Center, the library, where kids can go and tune into their classes and just open up their Chromebook and take the class.
Okay. I like having the creative opportunity for people to be able to make as many classes work as you're saying. I think that's great. I think having been a teacher, having kids Zoom into my class and teaching a live class seems really hard. Trying to devote my time to the kids I'm in front of, and then also trying to monitor what's happening on the screen.
Right.
And I don't have a solution for that.
But let me talk about that a little bit. It is hard. I mean, I've never done it, but but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think if you've got a dozen kids in front of you and you have, like 9 Zoomers in front of you, remote kids, that's very hard to, because it's a whole different dynamic that you're dealing with. So what we're going to try to do is for the foundational classes, I'm talking about a lot of freshman stuff, geometry, those types of classes, we're going to try, and I think we can do this, to keep the number of Zoomers in those classes down to no more than 3 or 4. Now with upper level classes, calculus class, an AP class, a German 5 class, I think all bets are off. I think those kids are functioning on a level where maybe having 10 or 12 kids on Zoom, I don't think we need to do that, but if we did, I think it would be a different deal. But I think we're trying to be very cognizant of the dynamics of that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
2 questions or comments about technology. First, cool idea to have people in the library or the media center if they are in the school and their teacher is remote. But I feel like every time I've opened up a Zoom meeting next to someone who's also in the same Zoom meeting, you get feedback and craziness. So am I right about that? Or is that just Teams? Headsets. Okay, that's a good answer. And then just to point out that I was talking to someone whose high schooler goes to Pinkerton Academy, and they got special equipment so that they could really maximize the opportunity to simultaneously broadcast and teach. And apparently it's working out really well. So I'm not sure what they're using, but it might be worth a call to find out if, in fact, we're going to end up needing to upgrade equipment.
Yeah, and that's part of that phase 4 I was talking about, Liza.
Cool.
Looking into that more sophisticated equipment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have one little question about Wednesdays, because I think I missed a few minutes. So the Wednesday remote synchronous classes are the opposite classes?
Correct.
Okay. That's cool. And I just want to point out that on the Crimson Week, the example given for cohort 1, let's see, the 2 Wednesdays are the same for the 2 different weeks. So you just want to update one of those weeks. I don't know which one is which.
If there's a mistake there, probably Kylene Chalaskis made it.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So I'm looking at the phase 1 when the 9th graders come in. Are we really doing 2 hours of lunch?
Yeah, yes. We do 2 hours of lunch now. I mean, when school was...
But like cohort 1 will have 2 hours of lunch?
No. Their class is split up.
Yeah,
They're 90-minute class. Yeah.
These are different lunches.
If you had English during the lunch block, Gina, you'd have lunch A, and then the next 90 minutes you'd be in English. If you had bio, you'd have lunch B. So you'd go to bio for 30 minutes, then you'd go down to lunch, then you'd go back to bio.
Yeah, these are separate.
So he's just listing the times of each
Sorry,
lunch.
I'm just having trouble
No,
with
you
the
haven't,
block grant.
until
Or
you've
the
taught
block-
here, that wouldn't make sense. So depending on the class you have during the lunch block dictates what, like PE classes have D-lunch. You have your whole PE class, then you go to lunch.
Look at the block above us. We're at 11:05 to 12:05.
Got it, okay.
Yes, and they're lettered, too. You could see.
Back in the day, we just didn't have lunch on those days, so.
Jim, do you have a question?
I've known that Steve Rothenberger, the
Just
CRTC
board members.
director, actually frequently takes all of those lunches. I've heard that.
And that's sort of another question I have about transportation, CRTC, and kids that are, I guess, taking a class from a remote teacher. If they're not supposed to be in school because they don't have to be,
Right.
let's say that's period whatever, and then the following period they're supposed to be in school, but it's 6 minutes between classes. How do we get them from wherever they are to wherever they need to be?
Okay, well, if they're in school, they're not...
Well, yeah, if they're in the media center or whatever.
They're all
but-
set. But obviously, if they have they have to be to school for their first class, for their first in-person class. They obviously can do the remote stuff at home.
But would they have time to get here? Or if they needed to take a bus?
But you were saying, for example, let's say,
Because of the passing time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem. Because that passing time is based upon you actually being in the building.
right, so what I'm saying is if they're home because the class is remote, the teacher's remote, and they don't have to be here, but then their next class, they have to be here,
Right.
we've got 6 minutes.
Yes. So, yeah, take the rest of the night off, Gina, because we got to, yeah, we'll have to address that.
I'm just looking at it going, wings, Red Bull, that's it.
Yeah. No, that has to be taken into account, clearly.
Jim?
Mike, over here. So I have a question. Over the past couple of weeks, I've had some students from the high school as well as parents ask. They've commented that they've got an awful lot of homework, that the level is really high. And so if you are doing a Crimson Week, will you only be doing Crimson Week homework?
Probably,
Or will you be doing
yeah.
both homeworks? And how will we regulate that level? Because if you're doing an intense week of 2, 4, 6, and,
Right.
you know, they also have homework from 1, 3, 5, 7.
Right.
You know, is there a way that their departments are getting together to balance that out? I
Yeah,
guess?
well, I would just say that first, I say two things. First, in our present incarnation of being remote, we have, on Wednesdays, we have what we call Dostoevsky days and Tolstoy days. And on, so certain departments have Dostoevsky days, they give the homework. And on the Tolstoy days, the other ones do. These are the types of, the thing that Gina brought up, the homework, because if everybody's giving homework, all 8, even though the classes are split in half, it's going to be counterproductive. So we will work out a plan to do that.
And then Barb, we have an audience member that had a question, so how will you be handling questions?
So that will be, audience participation is when everyone has spoken and we've, wound down, any public comment at that time will be at that time.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, anything?
This may be for the administrators up there. Cohort 1 and 2 versus Group A and B in the elementaries, do they match up, or are we not trying to match siblings across the levels?
As the principals mentioned, we started with a very specific plan. The high school had first dibs at it. They cut their 2 groups, and yeah, you're right, you're using 1 and they're using A, but 1 is A and 2 is B. So
Okay.
it's the same thing. We'll use 1. We've been using A and B for a while, but we'll figure out what designation we'll use in the next day.
Okay.
But and so that, as he described, the high school started, they did their cuts, and with siblings onto middle school. Middle school had to do their cuts with siblings, and then that went to the elementary school. This is why this planning takes such a substantial amount of time. Talk about spreadsheets. You can't believe the
Oh my gosh,
spreadsheets we
yeah.
have.
Thank you.
Do the spreadsheets cover the wall in the gym?
Thank you.
And they're laminated and sprayed, yeah.
I have a general question.
Tom, please.
So, well, excuse me. So Principal Reardon mentioned teacher collaboration time, and there's not a person sitting in this room that doesn't believe that if we ever needed teacher collaboration time, this would be the year that we need it. I saw the built-in, probably teacher collaboration time in the elementary schedule for your art and PE, but Paulette, I did not see it in the middle school. You don't have to re-show me. You just assure me that it's available. Yes, it is available. Thank you very much.
Are there any other, now Kathleen and Donna, do you have any sort of wrap-up? And then, okay, we'll go to you then. So write your questions down, people.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our presentation. And we're just going to talk a little bit about our staffing situation. And this is the other piece that has made all of this very chicken and eggy. As people talk about, can I be with my teacher? Am I not with my teacher? Am I moving around? It's all moving objects all the time. This is, as of this morning, the number of teachers. Now, this is just classroom teachers, not the student services, special ed and related services and those folks. People who are teaching regular classes, whether they art or music or language arts or math, those folks. At the elementary, 7 individuals have asked for an accommodation relative to the areas that one can ask for, medical situation for themselves, their family, and childcare. 86 have not. So even though that seems, wow, that's great, it's still a process to figure out how each of the grade levels, every single grade level at every single school has some opportunity for remote. Because even the smallest one, I think we have one kindergarten where we just had 2 kids who want to be remote, right? In one school, just a kindergarten. So just think of that spreadsheet, every class of who's asked. So, and then in middle, there are 8 individuals. Again, this was, as of this morning, the deadline was yesterday to make the request, but you know, sometimes things go a little past deadlines, and so we know things are still coming in. And at the high school, 17 individuals have asked. And so those are still being processed in HR. Now, the opposite side is the students. So we asked people their preference I think it was just a few days before the vote for the board. We were anticipating getting ready to make a move, and we wanted to know where the families were again. We had asked them that quite a while ago, so it was time to ask again. We asked people what their preference was, what they wanted. And I know that that was hard for people. I had a lot of folks connect with me, and I had a lot of conversations with people, some of them email and talking, and people are saying, but I don't know how to decide because I don't know what it's going to look like. How do I know? I can't, I don't know what to choose. And so I said, that's okay, then wait. And people will reach out to you, as the principals have been doing, and continue to do, reaching out so that they can everyone can make good decisions. That being said, we accounted for about, I think it was over 2,000 students, I've forgotten now, that were accounted for through that. So lots of people did feel quite comfortable going and doing it, and some people didn't. But as of, again, I think it was either this morning or late yesterday, at the elementary level, 1,299, on behalf of 1,299 students, are asking for hybrid, and 282 asking for remote, and there are 15 they're still tracking down. So at the elementary schools, they've been doing lots of reach out to families to say, what is it you want? They've sent notes saying, okay, if you want something different than you said in your survey, make sure we know this. And so their numbers are pretty tight. Middle school, these were from yesterday, and they're probably much lower at this point. They're still counting. People are calling, and so that's where we were in terms of, and high school was doing a lot of reach out, though Kylene just said that's really coming along. So these are the issues. You know, when you look at this, and then you look at this, and you hear what these folks said, this is what they're trying to sort out. Who is teaching at every single grade level? So in the elementary, particularly K-5, who is teaching remote at every grade level and who's teaching hybrid? And some of the chunks, because you see there's not that many, somebody's saying, okay, I'll do it. I don't need to, I don't have to, I don't have children, or I don't have a health condition, I'm okay, but I'll be the one to do that, as opposed to others.
A quick observation. So I've gotten the sense that people feel they aren't being allowed to choose remote, that they might have to go on leave or give up their job. But right now, with our 7 remote teachers and the number of elementary students that want to be remote, that would be 40 students per teacher. So I think we need more remote teachers based on these initial numbers. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there because with my little calculator, looking black and white at the numbers, I'm sure I'll hear this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's all broken down by school. And remember that it's true that a 5th grade teacher could theoretically teach kindergarten. But the other thing we're trying to do, as I think these folks said, is make as few changes as possible.
Right.
To try to keep as many kids with their same teachers. So that we don't throw up that would have been one way to do it. Literally clear the deck and throw up every kid and every teacher and reshuffle. But we're trying to keep as many kids as possible in the spaces that they are. So there are lots of moving parts, definitely.
Yeah.
Donna,
Yes.
can I ask you to try and speak a little more slowly?
Oh, sorry. I am going to
sorry.
speak more slowly. Thank you, Gina. So yes, lots of moving parts there. Kathleen, sorry, Danielle?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So, for example, for elementary school that had 282 remote, I'm unclear about, I guess, what Barb said. So there are 7 teachers who asked to be remote. Is that correct?
There are 7 people who have requested because of those specific
Right,
reasons.
okay.
And other
And there-
people who said, I'll prefer to do it or I can do it.
And
Yeah.
will there be more than that 7?
Oh, yes, they'll have to be.
Okay,
Because
that's
as I
what
said, imagine that there has to be one, or almost one. I mean, again, in a school where just 2 children in kindergarten, say, or in 1st grade, want to be remote, we won't have a teacher for just 2 children.
Okay, so that's just who requested, but not what the final number was?
Of course, because you have to do that math, because it's across schools and within schools. So, exactly.
So in the kindergarten example, are we combining classes from various schools?
We are thinking that we may have to in very, very limited situations, hopefully. We've taught, really, to be honest, we talked about doing multi-age things. We've talked about, but we don't want to move kids. Once they're there, we want them to stay there for the rest of the year. That's it. They'll stay with their teacher. So in the Zooming piece, with the little kids, we did also talk about that. But there's a certain, if I'm just going at home watching every day my kindergarten friends at school, we don't think that's a healthy situation. We want them to have a strong remote learning experience if that's what their families want for them.
So to clarify, though, we're not moving a kindergarten kid to another school. We're talking about combining kids from various schools in one remote class, correct?
Yes, not physically moving them because they're remote. But I just want to say, just to be completely clear about this, if we were able, say in May or March, I don't know, whenever, to come back to school, we would want them, if possible, and if everyone wanted that to happen, to stay with their teacher they were with. Even if it meant that we had to move kids across the city, which is very complicated. But just know that these are all part of the conversations that we've been having.
But at this time, we're not moving kids who normally would be at Krista McAuliffe and saying, oh, by the way, to balance things out, we're sending you to Beaver Meadow, right? We're
Not
just
for
saying,
hybrid. No.
We're just
For
saying
remote.
for remote. If you
Yes.
chose remote, you may be with a teacher that's not at Krista McAuliffe. You may be with some other kids. If there's only like 2 per each school, that would be together in one thing.
That is
So
exactly
people-
correct.
So people going hybrid are going to the school they normally would go to.
100%.
I just want to be clear because I don't want to create a confusion with parents. on that.
Thank you for clarifying
Thank you,
that.
Jim.
That is hugely
That's the
important.
question I meant to ask,
Yes.
so thank you for doing that.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm going to speak to the last piece, because this piece does come up quite a bit. And it's all around the protocols and procedures for a safety environment. And we've, by the way, I think the principals did a fabulous job tonight. I really am, I'm proud to sit here and listen to them. They have worked so hard, and I think they did a fabulous job in putting this all together to meet the needs of all our kids, so kudos to them. But anyway, the other major issue that comes up a lot with our families, our parents, is all around the protocols and procedures for a safe environment. And I just want to quickly review them. You've heard these many, many times, but it never hurts to repeat them. And that's screening, first and foremost, both at home and at school. We are asking for both of those to happen so that we can be assured that temperatures and the questions that we ask them are done. We've also actually bought some thermometers for anybody who doesn't have an under-the-tongue thermometer and needs one. We have that available just so we make sure that temperatures are taken. Masks are mandatory. We've made that clear. I think you heard Principal Reardon, and he indicated that that's not anything we're fooling around with. There's an expectation that everyone wear their masks. Now, somebody will say to me, there are some youngsters that are they're in training. We're working with them. We're helping them to learn and put them on, keep them on, and teachers have been fabulous about creating a kind of situation for those youngsters so that they're wearing their masks. If they need a break, they take a break. They are outside. We've been so fortunate with beautiful weather, so we're doing that. But that's very, very important. And as Michael said, if they're not wearing their masks and they're playing those games, then they have to go to remote, because we cannot risk that. We have to worry about all the other youngsters and staff that are in the building. Continue with the 6-foot distancing. Our supervision of our staff is critically important in this area, reminding everyone about that 6-foot distancing. We have signs everywhere. We have arrows and markers in hallways, outside, lining up. All of that is done, but you still have to remind the youngsters about those things. We're doing as much cohorting as we can, keeping youngsters together, not mixing, having them travel together in a group if they do travel, but in every case we try to keep them in their classrooms. But again, that's a difficult thing as the youngsters get older and their classes are different. Again, no visitors or vendors in the building. We've made that clear too. Let's kind of keep this as a stable environment with people that we know are coming in and out. That also helps us, you know, when we do contact tracing, that we know who's in the building and who isn't in the building. No large groups, no assemblies. We can't do any of that right now. Maybe, as Donna said, in May, when things get better, maybe we'll be back together face to face and we can do some of that. But right now, no large groups. Again, I think I mentioned movement in the building is limited. Great question by Jim about cleaning and disinfecting every single day rather than waiting to do a deep clean on Wednesday. Not that that won't happen on Wednesday, but every day will be a sufficient cleaning for everyone. And again, Matt's moved his team around so that he can do that. And again, the use of outdoor spaces. We're seeing the youngsters outside. Great article this Sunday in the paper about the kids outside in tents in some of the amphitheaters where they're having classes outside. And we're encouraging that. Again, we're fortunate with such fabulous weather. So I just tried to get a little idea about some of the questions that seem to come up most frequently from parents. And so what if someone's symptomatic with a new and unexplained symptom? It's not a youngster that it maybe has allergies, that it's common. This is something that would be different. Any person with a new or unexplained symptom will be excluded from school and instructed to isolate at home and to contact their primary care provider for COVID testing. And they can return, but these are the criteria in which they can, or the conditions of which they can return. Person who had the test is negative, and any symptoms that they had, if they said they had a headache or they had a sore throat, those symptoms have to be gone and they have to be fever-free. I mean, it could have been the result of an ear infection, right? But we didn't know that, you know, and so the negative test and all symptoms have improved and they are fever-free. The other one is a person has completed self-isolation at home. They have to be out at least 10 days, have passed since symptoms first began. And then 24 hours after their fever, and no cheating. Can't take aspirin to keep that fever down. We have to make sure that it's free of a fever for at least 24 hours, and all their other symptoms have improved. What do we do when there's a concern for COVID-19 in the building? What if someone has come in close contact with someone who's diagnosed? Any person identified as close contact needs to self-quarantine for 14 days. If anyone has been in close contact with someone, then they must self-quarantine for 14 days. I really want to emphasize that. That's critically important. What if someone has a family member who is close contact and has to quarantine? Do family members have to quarantine also? This comes up quite a bit. Household contacts of someone who is required to quarantine do not themselves need to quarantine. I want to be clear on that. I mean, if your brother was in contact with somebody who had COVID and he's in the house now because he was quarantined because he had close contact, doesn't mean that you have to have it. So does everyone understand that? That it's a little, that's the one that is kind of tricky for people to realize. If I'm going to repeat this story. If my brother has close contact with someone who has been diagnosed with COVID-19, okay, he has to quarantine for 14 days. Now, he may not have COVID, but he has to quarantine, okay, for 14 days. But I don't, as the third party. Think about me as the third party. I don't have to. People say, well, are these your own rules? I want to be clear, and I use the word recommendation, and I really shouldn't. These are guidance information from the Division of Public Health. They're the folks that help us. I think Donna showed you earlier some of those charts. They're the ones that give us the direction and have set the parameters for how we understand what to do should we be faced with a situation. So again, we get great guidance from them, and we use that guidance to help us make decisions. What if somebody travels outside of New England? I think the governor has been very clear about this, that we must quarantine for 14 days upon their return and must self-monitor for the symptoms of the virus. What do we do? What if someone has a family member who has tested positive, but they are asymptomatic? Any person, again, they have to quarantine for 14 days. From their last contact for the person who's infectious. So any close contact, think about this, somebody who's diagnosed, your close contact, that's the 14-day self-quarantine. If a student has to remain at home for quarantine or isolation, will they have to change teachers to study remotely? We're working on all of these scenarios. They're amazing, because it's not like 1,000 kids have this situation, but it's 1 or 2 that may have this situation. But students will be allowed to participate remotely into their classes while at home. It makes sense to be able to have that student in with their class, but they must do it remotely.
Kathleen?
Right.
Will there be flexibility for teachers? So say I'm teaching math at the high school, algebra, and I have one person quarantined. Do I have flexibility as a teacher on how to keep that student involved remotely? Will I automatically have a Zoom on, or will there be flexibility?
They will be able to come in on a Zoom.
Okay.
It's very similar to your school board meeting about a month ago. Remember?
We had both.
A couple, what month was, I don't remember what month it was. It seemed like.
This month.
This month, September.
Liza was up there.
Right. Liza was on the screen because she had just put in about 15 hours down at Town Hall with the election. So she came into the meeting remotely. She participated in the meeting. It would be the same thing in a classroom. Now, I know there's challenges. I think Danielle said it best. There's challenges, and we recognize that. That's why Michael talked about the camera, and that's what Pinkerton is using. They're using cameras in the classroom. That's how they're doing that piece.
Question. What if, a common question, what if someone comes to school and when they're at school and they're coming in, that we test them and they have 101 fever, or say something, and they're here at school, they've already been, they're here, how do we get them home, or what's the process or procedure for that?
Right, we've talked a lot about that. If the child has the temperature taken and that temperature is over 100, they are immediately isolated, and the school nurse, our registered nurse, will work with that student, stay with that student, evaluate their wellness. Parents will be called immediately to come to school to pick up the youngster. Now, we also, it's realistic, right? We live in the real world, and the parents are at work, and how do we get home? And maybe they haven't answered their phone, so we have to deal with how we're going to transport the youngster home, but we can't send a youngster home unless there's an adult there. So we really are relying on our parents to make sure that they come and pick up their student or somebody who's on the emergency list.
Have you looked into any apps for screening? I know, for example, my sister's kids go to school in a very remote part of New Hampshire, and they have, if they can do it, I think anyone could do it. They have an app on their phone, and the nurse generated all of the questions. And it was, is your nose running? Do you have a fever? And then they had to enter the temp. And then, as a result, they have they have a pretty small school. They turn kids away at the door who haven't filled that out for the day. At the very least, it would red flag kids that maybe need to be screened, especially at the elementary level, by a nurse, maybe one-on-one.
So we talked about that at some length with the nurses. It was Matt Cashman and I had a pretty substantial meeting today with the nurses to catch up on things and talk about going forward. And we talked about just that. And there's pros to it and there's cons to it, because when you think about the high school, before they walk in the door, you would have to know that they had filled it out. And so say a couple hundred kids hadn't filled it out. Now they've walked in the door, and now you have to go find them and get them to fill it out. It's just a little tricky because you don't necessarily know. You'd have to stand at the door and literally check everybody in before they come in. So we are looking at it. Let me say that. We just want to know the pros and cons of using something like that and what that involves.
Sense. I think it just would be helpful to have, even just to have it in writing. I think that, we screened our child. We're sort of trusting that that's going to happen.
Right.
Hopefully it is.
Right. And then we also get into a sort of a haves and have-nots sometimes when we do that, because we have families who don't have the technology or the telephone with an app on it, or the language skills. So there's a lot of pieces to think about in our community, but that's to say we are thinking about it. So
just a thought.
I'm going to just go to the last slide in this particular topic, and that's what would we do in the case of a COVID-19 diagnosis. And if a student or a staff member tests positive, first thing we do, we hear from the Division of Public Health. They reach out and notify based on the results of a positive test, and they reach out to our school nurses, our school administrators. Sometimes, and as you know, in this last case that we had, we did not hear from them. And so our principal, once we got the information, our principal reached out immediately to the Division of Public Health and worked with them in terms of the next steps for the process. And I think on number 3, that's what I said, the school administrator can also contact the division. They notified me, of course, and appraised me of that information. And then the school administrators help in identifying all of the close contacts. Remember now that they determine a close contact to be within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more with the person who was confirmed. It isn't just somebody passing in the hallway. It has to be within 6 feet and 10 or more minutes with the person in order to be considered part of that close contact. And then the division, along with us, issue school and community notifications. Now, there was some criticism on the last one about there seemed to be a delay in the information, and I was in communication with the families. They were emailing Donna and I that day because they were waiting to hear, because I had said in my letter that they would be hearing. The division stepped in. They were getting all of the data that they needed from the school, and then they reach out to these families. So they don't go any step further until they've reached out to all the families to do that first. We don't call the families and say, oh, by the way, your son or daughter was in close contact. That's their job. That's very specific. So there was some delays. They talked about that, because it does take time. Now, that happened to be a large group that they wanted to make sure that they understood the impact of the band program, right? Because there were a number of youngsters involved. So there was a delay, and I know some people were expressed some concerns about that. Obviously, we're going to be tracking that. The new dashboard that the state has identifies all the schools. I think you saw that for Merrimack County, and every school in the county, including colleges and two-year schools. They're in there also giving the number of cases at each school. And if you look at Concord, you'll see there is one for Concord High School, and that's up for public information. So that's really what we're doing, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I'll start with board member questions, and then I'll go to people in the public that want to ask. So I saw Gina, then Tom, then Jim.
So I want to ask under number 6, I understand that public health contacts the people who are within the 6 feet for 10 minutes or more, so that they are the high-risk people of potential contact. But is there a procedure by which we contact the members of our community saying, we've had a student, and the Department of Public Health will contact those families of students who need to be concerned, but the rest of you, if you're not contacted by the state, you don't need to be concerned, but you do need to know that it's out there. I think that was part of the problem the last time around, is that people didn't know what the process was. They heard through rumor, they heard through Facebook. A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend said, God help us, we get our information like that. That something comes out from the school district saying, we've had a student test positive, you don't need to be concerned unless you've been contacted directly.
We did send a letter out.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that, so
we sent a letter out identifying the process, and the contacts would be made to the division, and that went out first thing Thursday morning. As soon as I got word from Mike Reardon at the high school, and we knew what the department did, we sent a letter out to the community. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Critical.
I didn't see a letter, so that's why I was asking if we could put that together.
Well, I'm going to find out why you didn't get a letter. I guess that's one of my things I better look into. Okay.
Who's next?
Yes, it's me. So you folks have done a heck of a lot of work. An unbelievable amount of work, beginning in the summertime to where we are right now. I receive, and I'm sure my colleagues receive, emails on both sides. Send the kids back, don't send them back, send them back, don't send them back. I think it's important to hear from our top administrators, our top educational specialists in this district right now. If we have our youngsters, our kids in a place right now, and parents have kind of maybe figured out that there's a schedule in there and it's working, why, educationally and philosophically, and I know my answers to this, but I think the public deserves to hear from you. Why are we moving to get them back into school? People want to know that.
And I think that's a fabulous question, and then we deal with it every day.
Sure.
But I will always side on the side of children. Children need to be in school for their social and emotional and human growth and development. They need to be with their peers. We know that. We know that they need to see their teacher, they need to connect with that teacher, and they need to develop those relationships, because those are the factors that encourage and motivate children's learning. I mean, God forbid if we don't need teachers, we'll just give everybody a Chromebook and have them go online and do Khan Academy and VLAX and where's the relationships? I can tell you, sitting in this chair, every single teacher I had in school, and I didn't think I was going to be an educator, by the way, so it wasn't because I was like, those relationships are so important. And the significant impact that our teachers and our administrators and our ed assistants, everybody, by the way, in the building, their kids that connect with our custodial staff. They love the ladies in the food service. Who loves going in to get your lunch and seeing the ladies smiling at you? And think about the bus driver. I was over at Paulette's school this week I forget why we were there. We had a meeting with Paulette, and I talked to a bus driver. And you know what he said to me? I miss my kids. He didn't say the kids. I miss my kids. And those are the relationships that we can't replace online. And I know parents are worried about it. I am too. It's my responsibility here. There's a lot of weight on a lot of my shoulders, and the people that I work with every single day, these principals worry about it. We meet with them every week. Lately it's been every day. And we love them. But they worry. They are worried if we had an outbreak. But I think we're prepared. I think we have all of the protocols in place. We have all the resources available to us. And in a minute, we can pivot. Because not only now are our teachers pretty skilled in this remote learning, they are so anxious. They tell us the teachers want to come back. They want to be with my kids. And if I can answer Tom's question in a passionate way as a long lifetime educator, that's my answer.
It's a great answer, too. Thank you.
Jim?
So Superintendent, I have one more question, and it comes from your last slide, and I just want to make sure, what are we doing to make sure or to reaffirm the message to parents and students as well? If you're sick, stay home. There will be no attendance awards given at all this year. And so if someone is sick, stay home, let them remote come in, let them do their assignments. But I really want to stress that's one of the key things that I did not see necessarily up there. But if a student is sick, they should not be in school.
Yeah, let me just say one more thing. I also have to do that for some other group. Do you know who that group is? Teachers. They come in and I met with some teachers this afternoon, and they're all guilty, including yours truly. They for whatever it is about teachers, they feel like they have to be at work. And I know some of you have been teachers over there and on the board, and you know. And so we have to remind teachers that if you're not feeling well and you have symptoms, stay home. We'll manage. Somebody said, well, you have trouble with substitutes. We recognize that. We know we could, but we'll manage. These folks, you heard the creativity here. We've put out ads. We'll get extra people in the buildings to be able to manage that. But we also have to do that with teachers. Donna wanted to say something.
I did, because this came up today in a meeting with these principals, and they're nodding their heads because they have worked so hard to get their attendance to be excellent in their schools. They have told parents, it's okay if they have a runny nose, come in, it's fine. This is in the past. Come in, we need you in school. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. They've been giving those messages, and they worked. The kids come to school. Now we have to, and they were saying this morning, they have to shift gears and really push on. Even with a runny nose, even with whatever it is, you've got to stay home. So they're talking about knowing they have got to message this like crazy. And I think people are prepared to do that, so.
Gina, then Liza.
Can kids that are staying home sick Zoom into their class?
If they're up to it, why not?
Well, I mean, if you've got a runny nose,
Right, and
or
you-
whatever, I
right.
mean, you're not on death's
Right.
door. Obviously, if you're on death's door, stay in bed.
Right.
Sleep, fluids, you know,
but if
the
it's
standard thing.
just a-
But if you're got a sore throat and you're staying home, you won't necessarily miss a day. You can Zoom into the class. Thank you.
Liza?
That was my question, and so I guess we just need to make sure that, it sounds like the high school and the middle school will be perhaps more equipped to do that immediately than the elementary levels, but all the teachers are going to be prepared to teach in person and remote at the same time, because there could be, a cold going around or whatever the case. It does lead to a question about teachers who have a cold but can still teach remotely, and/or if a teacher needs to be quarantined because of a close contact or whatever, but they feel fine, will they teach their in-person classes remotely, or will there be substitutes in a case like that?
Well, we'd like them to be able to teach remotely, so this is our plan, that they can teach remotely, and that we put out an ad for some monitors and proctors. We have a monitor and an educational assistant in the classroom to be the supervisor while the teacher's out teaching. So we're trying to be prepared for that very incident.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dawn is going to add.
I know that's not always going to be possible, though. Very young children, it may be difficult for them to relate to that. So we're still looking for more subs, more people who can do that work. This is a problem probably all over the world, but certainly all over this area, is trying to find enough people, and we're just trying to push on that as much as we can. But it's just we're going to have to work with these things as they come up, and work with teachers and make sure that we're not asking them to do superhuman things, depending on their levels and what they can do.
Thanks.
Danielle. I just have a comment and a question. I'm trying to take over for Chuck, I think. My comment is, I just wanted to say, I know that the principals and administrative have done a lot of work, and I just want to say, as somebody who has been able to work remotely, but whose husband has really been in charge of remote instruction, that having the opportunity to sit at the table and listen to what's happening with both of my kids has been phenomenal. And I know people who have been very against remote, who have come in to me and said, this actually is working, and it's working way better than I thought. I think of my daughter who's in 3rd grade. It's her first year with a Chromebook. So the teacher is teaching 20 kids normal 3rd grade stuff, but also how to do it on a Chromebook at the same time. And it's amazing the amount that she's gotten done, and that she's made these amazing connections where, my daughter doesn't want to leave her teacher, whatever the situation is, or whatever scenario she goes back to. In this short time, she has made that bond, and I know that's something we've been really trying to push with our kids, so I really do think it's important that we try to keep as many of those connections as strong as we can going forward. And even, my son now is 6th grade at Runlet, and, this is a huge transition year for him, and we really worried a lot about what that would look like remotely. He was in a breakout room the other day and was sitting there with a couple of kids, and we heard him from the other room say, is someone going to say something, or do you want me to start this? And as someone who's the probably biggest introvert in the world, to hear that and to hear him really feeling confident makes me feel good no matter what direction we go, hybrid, remote, wherever. I do have a lot of faith in our teachers, and I know that they've already gone above and beyond and are stressed to the max. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you. As somebody who's trying to manage it at home a little bit, they are thriving. So thank you for that. I forgot my question, but
Sorry.
thank you.
Gina?
Sorry, I have one other question that hasn't been touched on at all tonight. And what Danielle was saying somehow sparked it, because I thought of this question before I came. So the kids with, our vulnerable kids, our special ed kids, our English language learner kids, our unhoused kids, they've all been sort of segregated away from their regular classmates because they're going in to the schools and their classmates are remote. How are we integrating them back into the classes with their classmates and all of that?
So when they're in school, they're doing their remote classes.
Oh, okay.
And in addition, getting their special ed support. So they may be sitting with their special ed teacher or their ELL teacher while they're in their classes getting support. But then when it comes to, the next moment in time, they might be doing a little reading group with their special ed teacher, or they might be having some speech and language therapy. So they're doing their regular day with their class. They haven't been left out of their class.
Okay, thank you.
Liza?
If a family has chosen remote for their student and they decide that actually looks like hybrid's going really great in, say, November or December, and we don't know how long we're going to need to do this, but what are the options? And that goes for the other direction too. Say a child starts out in hybrid and it's not working as well for their family and they would like to switch to full remote. What are the timelines and what are the options, or are there? Thanks.
Right, so we've been talking about this as well. We think right now that it will be easier to go, if you're hybrid and you need to go remote. However, we understand that people may want to change, and we know some districts that said, this is it, you get one shot, it's for the whole year. We're not going to do that, but we are going to stick with our natural trimester, quarter type of a scheduling situation. We're not going to do it just any day of the week, but there will be a time period identified for you to make that adjustment.
Kind of like the drop ad period.
Drop ad period, right. Now, obviously, that said, if there's something really out of the ordinary, we obviously, our principals work with families to make sure things go. But in general, we are sticking with our normal. Our elementary has trimesters, and our middle and high school have quarters.
Thanks.
All right. I would now love to offer the chance for anyone sitting here who's not a board member to come down and share your comments and questions. So come here. Jim will wipe a microphone off for you, and I'll just ask you to give me your name. Go right over. He's taking care of you here. Tell me your name, hon.
So my name is Maureen. I'm a parent of 2 juniors at Concord High. It's our 5th year in the Concord School District. My kids have been in private school, they've been in charter school, and they've been in international school in Germany, and they've been in public school in Germany. Concord School District, unfortunately, is my least favorite. I'm very involved. I try to be involved. I'm probably the squeaky wheel. I love Tom Crumrine. Jim Corcom's been wonderful when I call. And I apologize for being the squeaky wheel, but my kids have one opportunity to be taught from grades K through 12. So I will always fight for education. I appreciate what all of you people are doing, I really do. I thank you for all the time and effort put into this. I just have some observations and concerns, that's all. One of the first things I noticed in one of the early slides was, all the summer planning that was involved. I noticed that curriculum was the very last on that list. And that's how I feel about this school district. I think feeding the kids, emotional stuff, and everything else is important. But I feel like the school district, the #1 reason you're here is to educate our kids. Sometimes I feel like that falls by the wayside. I do work in 2 hospitals. I work in 2 emergency rooms. I'm not a stranger to COVID and protocols that go along with it. I know it's not easy to work them and rework them. I also work in a retail pharmacy, and I haven't stopped working. I have 3 jobs. I have 2 kids that are juniors in high school. This is the most important year, in my opinion, for them in school, and I really don't want COVID or fear of COVID to be the reason they don't get the education that they deserve, that this school district owes them. So some other things I'm concerned with is, Mike, I appreciate the block thing you've been working on. I know you've been working on that for a long time. My question about that is, on Wednesday, it's sort of a skinny day for the opposite week. Are they doing that online? Are they doing that skinny, like on the Crimson Week, your Wednesday, they'd be doing a Tide, sort of a skinny day? Is that, when you say synchronous, do you mean, is it Zoom? They're going to have a teacher there?
It's Zoom at specific times.
Okay, awesome. So it looks like every other hour. That might be kind of tricky. But that's correct, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
But there are
So,
other things mixed in there besides just the classes.
okay. So I am happy to hear that they will be up in the morning, out of bed, on Zoom on Wednesdays.
Time off.
Excuse me?
No time off.
Okay. Well, they have 2 days off, basically. They have, if they're Monday, Thursday,
Those
they
are
do
not
that on
days off.
Wednesday. I understand that. I don't know how many of you have teenagers or had them at some point. How easy is it to get them up at 7 in the morning on a Sunday, say? Because that's what those days off are for me. I can't get my kids out of bed. And last spring, I couldn't get them out of bed. They laughed at me thinking, oh yeah, we have school. They have their computers, they have phones, they have internet, they have video games, and I'm working. So they're not accountable. The good thing now is, right now, 4 days a week, they are accounted for because they have a teacher there on screen. And I think that's 100% better than what it was in the spring. My daughter went from A's to all F's because she didn't hand one single thing in all quarter, and I didn't know it. All kids will tell you on Power School, oh yeah, it says a 40 because my teacher hasn't corrected everything yet. So my daughter had 1 remaining week of school and the remedial week after that to get everything in, and I ran to Dave Corkum, and he helped me out, but she had 2 weeks. And I really feel like the school failed her because of all the teachers she had, 1 teacher reached out to me, and that is Miss Woody, who is a math teacher, phenomenal. Emailed my daughter, who's 16, and CC'd me, luckily. Not a single other teacher reached out. In fact, her advisor told me she wanted to drop an AP history class. And I said, don't ever let my children drop a class without my approval. Why does she want to drop it? Did anybody reach out to me? Did anybody offer her help? No. So Miss Woody sent me an email. My kids didn't want me involved in their schooling at all. They were doing fine, yeah, leave us alone. When I found out my daughter was failing, she had a 40, basically a 0, because 40 is the lowest you guys give on the Power School or whatever. So I asked Miss Woody, I said, please don't tell my daughter, but require her to see you face to face. So she did. For the next 2 weeks, my daughter ended up with almost 100 in math. That's the difference that it makes. Online, remote, no interaction with the teacher, and having interaction with the teacher.
So I would love for Mike to be able to respond to that a little bit because it's a serious concern, but we're doing our 5-minute time limit.
Okay.
So if you have something that's relevant to right now. Last spring was a disaster.
I just want you to know that it makes a difference seeing a teacher on screen. The other thing I'm concerned about, sports are going on, that's great. CRTC's meeting, that's great. I also think that science labs should be happening, and I also think that ropes class should be doing some things, and I also think that environmental science and freshwater ecology should be able to do things if sports are meeting and CRTC is meeting. That should not be taken away from the kids. That's essential to those classes, so please consider that.
The ropes program is going forward.
Yes, my daughter's in it, and she did kayaking last week. I mean, unfortunately, they're not doing weekend things right now, but that was great, and I'm glad that that's happening, because she's been waiting for years to do that, so I appreciate that being done.
The issue around science labs is one of spacing. And for freshwater ecology, the issue is it's based on 7 field trips.
Okay.
And right now, there's a moratorium on bus trips.
Okay.
So we'll be asking the board maybe to
Okay.
give us a chance to do that.
And I also understand, and I've been through all the school districts with this, is that if everybody can't get there, then they're not going to have it. I don't think that's fair. It's just not fair. It's not fair to punish everybody if you can't get a bus of people there. If people can get dropped off or something else, I think it should at least be offered, maybe not required, but maybe an optional thing for these kids to do something like that. I would like to see that happen. So thank you for listening. I'm not complaining. I'm just a very
Well, you get to vent. You're a
concerned parent that wants my 2 juniors ready for college,
Yeah.
competitive for a 4-year school, and not be left behind because of COVID. I don't meet people at an ER door saying, I don't know how to take care of you because of this virus. We do it anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jennifer King. I'm the mother of a sophomore at Concord High. I came in here with a lot of bluster this evening, and thanks to the presentation. I don't need to read this. I do have one thing I wanted to point out is the survey that was sent the beginning of September. I did not realize that that was making my decision, casting that decision in stone. We were told to offer our preference, and at the time, I'm like, well, I have no more information now than I did earlier in the year, so my answer was no, he's staying remote. I too am concerned about the social emotional piece, so I'm not completely opposed to hybrid, but I wanted more information. And so to find out just recently that I pretty much selected remote as an option is not something I was completely set on, but that's what I felt I needed to do with the information that I had. And that kind of leads me to I think there were 746 at Concord High that are still to be determined. I'm just wondering if people just kind of say, oh, it's another survey. And I just think terming something like that as a survey probably wasn't the right way to present it. And I'm just wondering if that's why we have a lot of to be determined students in the community.
You're not the first, I'm sorry, you're not the first person that any of us have heard this from. You don't know what you're answering sometimes at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to hear if there's a quick answer to this question. That would be helpful.
I think that you should talk to your administrators because they're still collecting the information. And that's what we've been saying to folks who said, we're not sure. We had a comment opportunity, people sent to Concord Info, and every single person who did, we said, don't worry, take a breath, talk to your administrators. So, and lots of people have changed their minds, and the elementary principals will nod their heads. Lots of people are changing their minds and saying, you know what, I put this in at the time I wanted it, but now I want this. It's okay. It was not set in stone. We did ask your preference. Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. King, just send me an email in the morning, what you want to do. I'll take care of it for you.
Okay. I just want to end by saying I really, really do appreciate all of the work that has gone into this. I do feel better about my son attending a hybrid program, just in seeing the precautions that you've taken here tonight with people coming in. I do recognize that you're taking it seriously, and I just want to let you all know that it's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before I end the meeting, I just want to also sort of recognize and comment upon the fact that if we sat as a board and discussed the most difficult part of this whole process for us, three things would come up. The first would be nobody really knows what they're doing because we've never done this before. So we all lean on the person that's a bit smarter than us to help us with the decisions, the health department, the CDC, the news. And so this wandering around with uncertainty is really difficult as a board member. When people look at me and Tom and Danielle and all of us as it's my job to make sure it's done right, that's a heavy load to walk around with in an atmosphere of cluelessness. That's one aspect, and I think we're all that way. The comment you made about the ER, you have to make it up as you go along sometimes, which is horrifying. The second thing is, I get beautifully written, articulate, completely makes sense emails for every side of this issue. I finish this email and I'm like, you know what, we're just staying remote. I get it. And then 5 minutes later, I get just as good an email with just as many good, solid reasons for getting hybrid as soon as possible. And so here I sit. So which mom is more important? Billy's mom or Susie's mom? Remote mom or hybrid mom? Those decisions weigh unbelievably heavily. They weigh heavy on everybody here. And so I just want to acknowledge, as the chairperson of this committee, there really is no political school board agenda for me in trying to figure out what's right. Typically, when you have something over here and something over here, somewhere here is the most effective, truthful way to proceed. And I do feel, as different as we might be, we're all operating from a very, very true place of wanting what's best for our kids. So I just want to acknowledge the work of everyone else and also solicit understanding. We need to understand the parents need to understand us. We're all really trying to put something good together. And it's heart-wrenching and heartwarming to listen to all of this and to think, who would have thought that we would be discussing these things a year ago or 2 years ago. So I just want to try to end on a positive note. I always want to end these meetings in some sort of hopeful way. And if I can make one consolation or solace to everyone, is that you have a group of people at every level that really wants the right thing to happen. Nobody in here wants to do something foolish or make a mistake. So I just want to thank everyone. Thank you for coming and listening. Thank you for asking. Liza, thank you for commenting.
I'm sorry, do you care if I prolong the meeting again?
No.
I have a suggestion for the administrators and a question. I don't know if it's possible to get that back, but the suggestion is to have the principals, as soon as possible, do a mailing to their families and say, this is what you picked.
Is this what you want? Yeah.
Because I actually thought that I had not filled out the survey, but now that I'm hearing this conversation, I realize that I did fill it out. But I filled it out for my daughter, and I chose hybrid, and I'm pretty sure that my husband filled it out for my son, and he chose remote, and that's not going to work. So, it would be nice to, because at the time, again, as our commenter really wisely said, it was framed as a survey, which could be like, what kind of ice cream do you like? It doesn't really... A survey doesn't always matter. This is a decision that people may have made without realizing that it was hard and fast. So if we could get that information without having to ask for it, I think that would be really nice. My other comment / question is, and maybe this isn't for the instructional committee, but it is, we need to solidify a little bit more or clarify or add some narrative to the decision-making matrix, because what we have is a matrix, but there's nothing to say this is what we will do. When we hit this level, we will move to, we will stay with hybrid. We will, within 24 hours, we will notify everybody that we're going back to remote ASAP. And I would also like to attach actual numbers and percentages if possible, because I feel like, again, as we've said many times, New Hampshire is in a relatively enviable position with very low rates of virus transmission. But if that should change, are we going to need to push our hybrid open date? If that were to happen, what would we do? And I just feel like looking at the decision-making matrix is just a little bit too simple for me. I want to know, okay, guess what? If this school has 5 cases, that's it, everybody's back to remote. Or something that's readable for someone maybe who can't look at the grid and instinctively understand what we intend to do with the grid. Sorry, rambling a little bit, but people read things differently, and it wasn't spelled out clearly for me, and I think we need to identify some of those tipping points. If X, then Y. Thank you.
My only comment to that, Liza, is you're right, but we also rely on the resources available to us. So if we have a case, 1 case, 2 cases, 5 cases, however you want to describe it, the first thing we do is call the Division for Public Health. We talk to them. If you looked at all of the cases around the state, if you talk to the folks in Bedford, you talk to the folks in over in Somersworth, every person, every superintendent making those decisions about what they did in Somersworth, they went right to remote. In Bedford, they kept the kids in except for the, for the ones that had contact. So every case is different. So the same thing would be for us. I mean, we could have a case where I shut down a school, but not the entire district. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's going to be dependent on the discussion and the dialogue that I have with those folks at the department, the division, who is clearly engaged in this every single day. So I mean, this is kind of a guidance. This is a guide for us. Parents wanted to know, well, what's going to make you pivot from one to another? So it's really just a guide to help us. But truly, the work will be done. The decisions that will be made every time will be made in collaboration with the resources available to us. I know that doesn't help you, and it doesn't give you more clarification, but
No, it doesn't.
But it illustrates beautifully how many of our questions don't have answers, and nobody necessarily feels good about that. But an outbreak here shouldn't necessarily affect Millbrook School. So I think we rely on the Department of Health and Human Services. That's what they do, and they have the protocol. So if we were to be in a situation where they said, okay, you have to shut down, well, that's what we would do.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm dreaming. I think we could be clearer. I believe that especially the skinny grid that was most recently up there, and maybe it's just because of the way it's presented, and in another format I'll find it with a description near it, but it just that's okay, and I know it connects to the other thing, but the other thing also says, greater than 10%. Well, 10% positivity, that's crisis levels, Do we want to wait for 10%? Hopefully we'll get nowhere near that, but, is this the right thing for Concord? And thank you, that's all.
Right, you must have been at the last executive board meeting of the school board because they talked exactly about that. And so this week, my letter, I've been trying to do letters every week, and this week my letter is all about that, because we want to reiterate and re-emphasize how we get to those decisions, and that we make them and on behalf of the kids. So you're right on.
Okay, you have 5 seconds to raise your hand, and then I'm going to vote to adjourn the meeting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I would like to make a motion to end the meeting, adjourn. Do I have a second from a committee member? Danielle seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Barb.
Don't touch things.